Robert Kiyosaki is an entrepreneur and an author, and he is the author of a book that has become a kind of classic of personal finance and investment, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which came out now, I would say, a generation ago, but has been a sensation. It's sold, I believe, something like 40 million copies. I'm thrilled to welcome Robert Kiyosaki to the podcast. Robert, great to have you. Thanks for joining us. And let me start by asking you about the lessons of Rich Dad, Poor Dad in today's environment. It seems like we're going through kind of a bumpy political road, which might also cause a bumpy economic situation. But would you say that some of the core lessons of Rich Dad, Poor Dad are still just as relevant today as they were when the book first came out?
Correct. The book is selling more today than ever before. And I hate, possibly it's a classic. I can't believe it. But anyway, thank you for having me on your program. I'm concerned because I went to military school. I was a surfer kid in Hawaii, and I went to military school in New York. And at military school, I had an economics teacher who had us read, the Communist Manifesto, Stalin, Lenin, Mao, Hitler, and all this. And so that was in the 60s. And from military school, I joined the U.S. Marine Corps, and I went to fight in Vietnam twice. And I saw communism, in Vietnam, and I'm afraid I see it coming into America today. I don't mean socialism, I mean communism. And so that's why I'm concerned, because the story of Rich Dad, Poor Dad was written because the only way communism can come in is via poverty. And as long as we have no financial education in schools, our gap between the rich and the poor gets wider and wider and wider. And now I'm not Republican or Democrat, but we're giving more and more people money, which is communism. And I think we should teach people to fish, not give them fish. You know what I mean? And so my concern, the reason I wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad, without financial education, the U.S. is becoming a socialist communist country.
The framework of the book, of course, is to contrast your two dads, the rich dad and the poor dad. And the poor dad was always complaining and essentially professing, I'm entitled to this and I'm entitled to that. But the rich dad, I think, as you describe him, was always concerned about how do I create more value? How do I create value for others and thus benefit myself? Talk a little bit about the importance of this psychology, you might say, which seems to be critical for being a successful entrepreneur. What's the mindset that you need to pull this off?
Well, poverty comes from culture. You know that, I know that. And if we don't change culture, so my poor dad was an academic genius, Stanford, Northwestern University, Chicago, PhD, but they don't teach us anything about money at school. So my poor dad had a resentment against capitalists. And my rich dad was my best friend's father, was a hardcore capitalist. So at the age of 9 and 10, I would catch hell because my poor dad be angry that I'd be studying with my rich dad. And I'm a rich man today, again, because it's culture. I studied with my rich dad, not my poor dad. And so I learned to be rich playing Monopoly.
Robert,
so
one of the
real estate guy.
Yeah.
But that's how much a father can affect a kid. What's that?
Well, I was going to say that you talk about creating value by focusing on business. People often think that business is risky. It's better to get a steady job where I get a steady income. I can count on that. I mean, right. I think back of my relatives in India or even my own father, that was their psychology. Work hard, earn money, but be reliant on someone else to provide it, and then put the money in the bank and not in the market. So the avoidance of risk or fear drives a lot of people. One of the points you make very startling is that it's actually sometimes less risky to start a business because who, and we know this today, who can say that employment is going to be for life anymore?
Absolutely. And that's why I wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad 25 years ago. So my poor dad was an employee, a very smart man, head of education for the state of Hawaii, great guy. And my rich dad was an entrepreneur. But what kept my poor dad an employee was a fear of failing. But that's what they teach us in school. Don't make mistakes. If you fail, it means you're stupid. And when I came back from Vietnam and I asked my rich dad, I said, what should I do? He says, well, you should be an entrepreneur, but no, you'll probably fail 2 or 3 times.
That's one of the, that seems to me.
If you're prepared to fail, you can get through it.
Well, that's to me one of the wonders of America, is that in other countries, if you fail, you can't get up. You're sort of down on your back and it's the end of you. And I think that's why people don't do it. In America, you can fail and you can even go bankrupt, but you can scrub the slate clean. You can get back on your feet. So entrepreneurs, and I believe this is true of Jeff Bezos, for example, he tried many, many businesses before Amazon. So it wasn't like he hit a home run the first time at bat. He had a lot of failures before he found success.
Yeah, even this guy Elon Musk, his last rocket fell down.
Absolutely.
That's how you learn. We learn. Human beings learn by falling down, standing up, falling down, standing up. But our schools punish us for making mistakes, and so that's the culture of my poor dad. He was so afraid of making mistakes, whereas my rich dad basically said to me, he says, "You'll probably lose 3 businesses in your lifetime."
Wow. Robert, you're writing a new book. In fact, you interviewed my wife, Debbie, about it. The book, I believe, is going to be called, or at least the working title, The Capitalist Manifesto. Kind of a great title. What an alternative to the Communist Manifesto. You're a guy who's been extremely successful. You could be you're in Hawaii, you could be on the beach. You don't have to be spending time working on a book. Why are you doing it? What is the important message that you're trying to convey at this stage of life by writing this kind of ringing affirmation of capitalism?
Well, like I said, I went to military school, and the first word we're taught in military school is your mission. And so as an entrepreneur, the mission of the Rich Dad Company is to elevate the financial well-being of humanity through financial education, and we do it via games. I learned to be an investor playing Monopoly, and my wife and I created a board game called Cash Flow, and it's the only game that teaches accounting, the single most boring subject in business school, by allowing people to have fun. And if you can, Maria Montessori said, we learn via our hands, we learn by doing. And so by teaching people to learn accounting and entrepreneurship with our hands, we create more entrepreneurs. And that's what our country and the world needs now, is more entrepreneurs, not more people expecting a government handout or a stimulus. That's going to kill us.
I mean, it almost seems like we're reaching a situation in this country in which, you had a rich dad and a poor dad, but those were 2 sort of alternative models. It's almost like the Democratic Party or the left now has embraced the philosophy of the poor dad and all the entitlement and resentments that come out of that. So the rich dad, it's almost like America's at a fork in the road. Is it going to be rich dad or is it going to be poor dad? Is that the right way to describe it? Is that how you see it?
Well, I hope you speak Chinese, is what I'm trying to say. Those guys are coming after us. So I'm 4th generation Japanese American. I'm still fighting communism, but we fight it via education. You and I are in the same business, different professions, but we're fighting for capitalism. And that's why I teach. I teach as a capitalist. And I think that's the most important subject we can teach today, because I always ask this question, what does school teach us about money? Answer is nothing. And we wonder why we have problems today, So that's my mission. I'm still a Marine.
Well, it's so much needed, it seems to me, because we're at a time when our schools are obsessed with teaching anything but. They're trying to teach you these days about identity politics and do you know if you're a boy or a girl? And this is all at a time when people can't balance a checkbook. They know nothing about taxes, nothing about investments. They can't calculate interest rates. We even hear that math these days is racist. So, Robert Kiyosaki, thanks for coming on the program. I think your message is more needed than ever. I really appreciate it.
And tell Debbie, thank you for supporting my little program also. We're bringing people who've experienced communism to talk to people of the world. So thank you. Thanks, Debbie, for me.
That's absolutely awesome. Thanks very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.